My name is Zara, and I've always been drawn to the edges of things. The places where the map runs out and the whispers begin. That's probably why the job listing caught my eye. Night clerk wanted at Ozarks Motel. The remote location and strict adherence to protocol were handwritten on a faded index card, tacked to a gas station bulletin board in the middle of nowhere. Most people would have seen red flags. I saw an escape from a life that had become stale, predictable, and suffocating. I called the number, and a gruff, weary voice answered. A man who identified himself only as Mr. Avery didn't ask many questions. He simply confirmed I was willing to work nights alone and understood the importance of following instructions. He emphasized that last part. The rules are there for a reason, girl. Don't go thinking you know better. A few days later, I arrived at the Ozarks Motel. It was even more isolated than I had imagined, perched on a lonely stretch of highway overlooking a vast, mist-shrouded valley. The building was a relic of a bygone era, a two-story L-shaped structure with faded paint and a flickering neon sign that buzzed like a dying insect. The first truly odd thing I noticed were the windows. It was a humid day, and condensation had formed on the glass, but it wasn't random. The moisture seemed to coalesce into faint, fleeting words that shifted and changed before I could quite make them out. I rubbed one of the windows with my sleeve, and for a split second, I thought I saw the word leave before it dissolved back into a meaningless haze. I dismissed it as a trick of the light, a product of my overactive imagination. I was desperate for this job, desperate for a fresh start, and willing to overlook a lot. I should have turned around then. Mr. Avery was waiting for me in the motel office, a cramped, dimly lit space that smelled of stale coffee and dust. He was a large, imposing man with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of unspoken weariness. The atmosphere felt heavy, and I couldn't shake the sense that something was off. He didn't smile or offer me a handshake. He simply slid a thick leather-bound binder across the counter. "This is your cleaning protocol," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Follow it to the letter. No deviations." He then walked me through the routine, his tone brooking no argument. It was oddly specific. I had to clean the rooms in a precise order, starting with room 1 and ending with room 12. Each room had a detailed checklist outlining not just the usual tasks, making beds, cleaning bathrooms, vacuuming carpets, but also a series of peculiar instructions. "Use only the provided cleaning solution," he said, pointing to a row of labeled spray bottles filled with a cloudy greenish liquid. "No substitutions. Dust every surface, including the ceiling fan blades, even if they look clean. Empty all trash cans, even if they're empty." Then came the truly strange ones. "Never look directly at the shower." The weight of his words lingered in the air, creating an unsettling atmosphere that I couldn't quite shake off. "Shadows for more than 3 seconds. If you hear music, ignore it. It's not real. Do not acknowledge any guests who check in after 3 a.m. They are not your responsibility." I tried to ask him about these last rules, but he cut me off with a sharp gesture. "Just follow the protocol, girl. Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to." He seemed particularly agitated when he mentioned the shadows. He looked away, his gaze fixed on something unseen in the corner of the room. He handed me a heavy ring of keys, each one labeled with a room number. "Start tomorrow night. Be here by 11 p.m. sharp." And Sarah. He paused, his eyes finally meeting mine. "Don't break the rules." His gaze was intense, unsettling. It wasn't a warning, it was a plea. I nodded, a knot of unease forming in my stomach. I had a very bad feeling about this place. My first night shift started uneventfully enough. The motel was eerily quiet, with only a handful of guests checked in. I followed the cleaning protocol meticulously, scrubbing, dusting, and emptying trash cans, even the empty ones. The greenish cleaning solution had a strange, almost metallic smell that made my head feel slightly fuzzy. The no looking at shower shadows rule was the hardest to follow. It's human nature to glance at reflections and shadows, Each time I entered a bathroom, my eyes were drawn to the shower curtain and the dark, indistinct shapes cast by the dim light. I had to force myself to look away, counting to 3 in my head as a nervous mantra to avoid breaking the rule. By 2 a.m., I had finished cleaning all the occupied rooms and returned to the office, feeling strangely exhausted, as if the motel's silence was draining my energy. I decided to take a break and make some coffee. That's when I noticed it, a large, dusty ledger hidden behind the front desk, partially obscured by a stack of outdated brochures. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Curiosity and a growing sense of rebellion against Mr. Avery's cryptic rules got the better of me, compelling me to reach for it. I pulled the ledger out, its cover thick with dust. It was an old guest register dating back decades. Flipping through the pages, I heard the brittle paper crackling under my fingers. The entries were handwritten in various styles, some neat and precise, others scrawled and nearly illegible. What struck me was the repetition. The same names kept appearing over and over again, always assigned to the same room numbers. A Mr. and Mrs. Henderson were always in room 3. A John Smith was always in room 7. A Mary Peterson was always in room 10. Then I noticed the check-in times. Almost every single entry was recorded at precisely 3:33 a.m. A chill crawled down my spine. 3:33 a.m., the time I was explicitly told not to acknowledge any guests. It felt wrong, unholy. I flipped back further to the earlier entries in the ledger, and the same names were there, decades earlier, still checking in at 3:33 a.m. It was impossible. These people should be long dead. The realization left me unsettled, questioning the very nature of the motel and its guests. A growing sense of panic washed over me, a claustrophobic feeling as if the walls of the office were closing in. I needed to escape, to breathe. I slammed the ledger shut, the sound echoing in the silence. As I did, a cloud of dust puffed up from the cover, and I caught a whiff of something foul, a sickly sweet metallic odor reminiscent of old blood and decay. I recoiled, gagging, and stumbled back from the desk. Grabbing my keys, I bolted out of the office into the cool night air. I leaned against the railing of the porch, gasping for breath, trying to calm my racing heart. The night was still and quiet, the only sound the distant hum of crickets. I looked up at the sky, at the vast expanse of stars, seeking some sense of normalcy, some grounding amid the growing unease. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement in the window of room 6. A shadow that shouldn't have been there because room 6 was supposed to be empty. My breath hitched in my throat. Room 6 was supposed to be empty. The realization sent a shiver down my spine, intensifying my dread. I had cleaned room 6 myself just a few hours earlier, following the protocol to the letter. There shouldn't have been anyone or anything inside. Yet the shadow moved again, a fleeting glimpse of a human-like form behind the curtains. I strained my eyes, trying to make out details, but the dim light and thick fabric made it impossible. I told myself it was just my imagination, fueled by the creepy ledger and Mr. Avery's unsettling warnings. But deep down I knew it wasn't. Something was in room 6. I slowly walked back inside, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to see for myself. I needed to prove that I was just being paranoid. As I approached room 6, I heard a noise, a faint rhythmic tapping coming from inside. It sounded like fingernails tapping on glass. I hesitated at the door, my hand hovering over the doorknob. My rational mind screamed at me to turn around, to go back to the office and pretend I hadn't seen or heard anything. But curiosity, along with a growing sense of dread, propelled me forward, urging me to confront whatever awaited me inside. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and pushed it open. The room was dark, the curtains drawn, and the air was noticeably colder than the rest of the motel. The tapping sound had ceased. Fumbling for the light switch, my hand shook as I flipped it on, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent light. It was empty. The bed was neatly made, the towels folded, and the trash can was empty. Everything was exactly as I had left it. I let out a shaky breath, relief washing over me. It was just my imagination. I was letting the creepy atmosphere of the motel get to me. Then I noticed something on the floor near the bed. A small crumpled piece of paper. I picked it up and unfolded it, revealing a guest comment card, the kind motels usually leave in rooms. It was filled out in shaky, almost illegible handwriting. My heart raced again as I read the words, each one a chilling reminder that perhaps I wasn't alone after all. Room 6 is always dirty. It's red. I keep seeing hair in the shower, and the bed feels used. Also, I keep hearing children laughing at night. Please do something about it. The words on the guest comment card sent a chill down my spine. There were no children registered at the motel, and I hadn't seen or heard any since my arrival. This wasn't just my imagination. Others had experienced strange occurrences in room 6. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to check the security cameras. Several were mounted throughout the motel, including one covering the hallway outside room 6. I returned to the office and rewound the footage from when I had been cleaning the rooms. I watched myself enter room 6, clean it meticulously, and leave. The room remained empty for the rest of the recording. But then something strange happened. As I watched myself cleaning room 5, a figure appeared in the doorway of room 6. It was blurry and indistinct, but it was definitely there. A human-like form standing in the shadows, watching me. My heart raced as dread consumed me. I froze the image, zooming in as much as I could. The figure remained too blurry to discern any details, but I could make out its outline, tall and thin, with long dark hair, and it appeared to be wearing a dress. My mind flashed back to the ledger and the recurring names. Mary Peterson, room 10. As the security footage glitched momentarily, I thought I saw the figure wearing the same dress I had on. A cold wave of dread washed over me. I had a terrible feeling. I knew who the figure was, or rather, what it was. The realization that the figure in the footage might be connected to the names in the ledger, particularly Mary Peterson, sent a fresh wave of fear through me. This was more than just a haunting. It was a pattern, a cycle, and I was somehow caught in the middle of it. I needed to know more about the previous night clerks. Mr. Abernathy had been evasive when I asked about them, saying only that they didn't work out. Surely there were records, employment files, that could shed light on the mystery surrounding room 6. I started searching the office, rummaging through drawers, filing cabinets, and boxes. Most of it was mundane motel paperwork, invoices, receipts, guest registration forms. Then, in a locked drawer at the bottom of an old filing cabinet, I found a folder labeled Personnel. Inside were files for several former employees, mostly housekeepers and maintenance workers. That's when I found them. The files for the previous night clerks. Each file was surprisingly thin, containing only a basic application form, a W-4, and a termination notice. The termination notices were all identical, stating simply that the employee had left without notice. They all shared one unsettling detail. Each clerk had departed after exactly 7 nights. A chill ran down my spine. 7 nights, a significant number. 7 days in a week, 7 deadly sins. It felt ominous. I looked at the application forms, searching for any clues, any hint of what might have happened to these people. Their names differed, and their backgrounds varied. But there was one unsettling similarity. They all looked vaguely familiar. My heart raced as the implications began to settle in. Then I noticed something else. Tucked into the back of each file was a small black and white photograph. My hands trembled as I pulled them out. The photographs were old, faded and grainy, showing the previous night clerks standing awkwardly in front of the motel, smiling for the camera. As I looked closer, I realized what was so familiar about them. They all bore a striking resemblance to me. Not identical, but similar. The same general build, the same hair color, the same eyes. It felt like looking at variations of myself, echoes across time. A wave of nausea washed over me, my stomach churning. This was more than just a coincidence. Something was deeply, profoundly wrong. As I stared at the photographs, I heard a noise coming from the hallway, a soft shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet. Quickly, I stuffed the photographs back into the files and shoved the folder into the drawer, locking it shut. I stood up, my heart pounding, straining to listen. The shuffling sound grew closer, coming from the direction of room 6. Grabbing a heavy metal letter opener from the desk, I steeled myself for what awaited me. With my only weapon in hand, I slowly approached the hallway. Peering around the corner, my breath caught in my throat. Standing just outside room 6 was the figure, the same one I had seen in the security footage and glimpsed in the window. It was tall and thin, with long dark hair and wearing a dress. But this time, it was clearer, more defined. I could see its face, or what was left of it. It was a woman's face, pale and gaunt, with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. Her skin was stretched tight over her bones, resembling a skull draped in parchment. Her lips were pulled back in a grotesque silent scream, and her eyes were fixed on me, hollow and haunting. As she began to shuffle toward me, her pace quickened. The decaying woman, with the silent scream frozen on her face, drew closer. The air grew cold, a bone-chilling cold that seeped into my marrow. The metallic scent of the cleaning solution intensified, mixing with the foul odor I had detected from the ledger, creating a nauseating stench that threatened to overwhelm me. I was rooted in place, paralyzed by fear. I gripped the letter opener tighter, my knuckles turning white as my mind raced, desperately trying to make sense of what was unfolding. The photographs, the ledger, the repeating names, the 7 nights, it all pointed to a horrifying conclusion. The motel wasn't just haunted, it was alive, or at least something within it was. It was collecting souls, shadows. The cleaning protocol wasn't merely about cleanliness. It was a ritual designed to feed the motel, trapping people within its walls. The previous night clerks hadn't left. They had become part of the motel, just like the guests listed in the ledger. I recalled the manager's aggressive demeanor when explaining the rules, especially the warning never to look directly at the shower shadows for more than 3 seconds. Looking back at the figure, I realized something chilling. The shower in the rooms rearranged the room numbers. The figure was now just a few feet away, its skeletal hands reaching out toward me. I could see the details of its face more clearly now. The decaying flesh, the empty eye sockets, and the grotesque silent scream that echoed in my mind. I felt the weight of dread settle over me. The strands of long dark hair clung to its skull, and its clothes shifted and rearranged on their own. It was me, a future version of myself, trapped and consumed by the motel. Then I heard it, a faint whispering voice emanating from the figure, from the air around me, from the very walls of the motel. "Join us." The voice was a chorus, a multitude of voices whispering the same word over and over. They were the voices of the previous night clerks, the trapped guests, everyone who had ever been consumed by the motel. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall. I was trapped, with nowhere to escape. The figure continued to advance, its silent scream a horrifying counterpoint to the whispering voices. I could feel its cold presence, its suffocating emptiness drawing me in. Closing my eyes, I braced myself for the inevitable, knowing that the walls were closing in, and I was about to become just another echo in this cursed place. I was on the verge of becoming another shadow, another entry in the ledger, yet another victim of the Ozarks Motel. But then, a memory surfaced, something Mr. Abernathy had said. The rules are there for a reason. The cleaning protocol, the ritual, was designed to feed the motel, to trap souls. But what if I broke the rules? Not just ignored them, but actively and deliberately violated them. It was a desperate gamble, a long shot, but it was my only chance. I opened my eyes, my gaze fixed on the figure. I raised the letter opener, my hand trembling, and took a deep breath. It was time to break some rules. The decaying woman, my future self, was inches away, her icy breath chilling my face. The chorus of whispers intensified, urging me to join them, to become a permanent resident of the Ozarks Motel. I had to act fast. I recalled the cleaning protocol, the meticulously detailed instructions Mr. Abernathy had drilled into me. I needed to invert them, to do the opposite of everything I had been told. First, the room order. This was my chance to reclaim my fate. I had always been instructed to clean the rooms in a specific sequence, from 1 to 12. Room 6, the epicenter of the strangeness, was right in front of me. A nexus of broken rules, a space that defied the motel's twisted reality. That's where I would start. Ignoring the spectral figure's outstretched hands, I turned and kicked the door to room 6 open, shattering the already weakened frame. The sudden noise seemed to momentarily disrupt the whispers, a brief respite in the suffocating chorus. I remembered the cleaning solution I'd been told to use. Only the provided greenish liquid. I dashed back into the office, ignoring the shadowy figure slowly following me, and grabbed the first thing I could find. A half-empty bottle of bleach. It was the antithesis of the strange, metallic-smelling solution. Lastly, I recalled the warning about the shower shadows. Never look directly at them for more than 3 seconds. Racing back into room 6, I felt a surge of determination. It was time to defy the rules and reclaim my fate. With the bleach bottle clutched in my hand, I stepped into the dark room, the hallway lights spilling in but failing to illuminate the corners. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't want to see. My heart pounded as I headed straight for the bathroom. Ripping down the shower curtain, the plastic rings tore with a satisfying screech. I stared directly at the shower wall, fixated on the shadows cast by the dim light. I didn't just look. I focused, defying the most important rule of all. As I stared, the shadows began to solidify, taking on form. I glimpsed fleeting faces of the trapped souls, the previous night clerks, the guests who had never left. They were all screaming silently, their mouths open in expressions of terror and despair. Among them, I saw multiple versions of myself, all trapped, all screaming. The whispers intensified, transforming into a deafening roar in my ears. The air grew colder, the metallic smell stronger. The spectral figure was in the room with me now, its decaying hands reaching for me, its silent scream echoing my own fear. I had to remember the 4th rule, the order of the rooms. I looked around and noticed that room 6 was starting to change, morphing into another number. In a burst of determination, I splashed the bleach onto the shower wall, onto the shadows, and across the floor. The acrid smell of chlorine filled the air, a sharp contrast to the sickly sweet odor of decay. I didn't just splash it. I drenched the bathroom, pouring bleach over every surface, defiantly disregarding the meticulous cleaning instructions. As I doused the area, the shadowy faces in the shower recoiled, flickering and fading. The whispering voices faltered, replaced by a chorus of shrieks and groans. The figure in the room stumbled backward, its form flickering, its decaying face contorted in what I could only interpret as pain. I knew I was onto something. I was disrupting the motel's twisted reality, breaking its hold on the trapped souls. But I wasn't finished yet. I pressed on, moving to room 7 and repeating the process. The chaos in room 7 mirrored what I had started in room 6. The bleach fumes were almost overwhelming, but I pushed through, fueled by desperate hope and a growing sense of righteous fury. The shadows recoiled, the whispers fractured, and the spectral figure that followed me seemed to weaken with each broken rule. I continued my rampage, moving through the motel rooms in reverse order, a whirlwind of deliberate destruction. I emptied trash cans onto freshly made beds, using every cleaning product except the greenish solution, mixing them into a chaotic cocktail of chemicals. I ripped down curtains, smashed mirrors, and left each room in utter disarray, the complete opposite of my list. With every violated rule, the motel fought back. The lights flickered violently, plunging me into darkness before blinding me with sudden bursts of brightness. The temperature fluctuated wildly, swinging from freezing cold to suffocating heat. The whispers transformed into screams, a cacophony of tormented voices echoing through the halls. Yet, with each broken rule, the spectral figure pursuing me weakened further. Its form became less defined, losing solidity and resembling more the very shadows it commanded. It no longer reached for me, nor did it whisper, fading into a mere echo of the terror it once embodied. It just watched, its empty eye sockets filled with what I could almost interpret as fear. Finally, I reached room 1, the starting point of the prescribed cleaning ritual. This was it, the final test. I stood in the doorway, staring at the perfectly made bed, the neatly arranged towels, and the spotless bathroom. It felt like a mockery of the chaos I had unleashed, a reminder of the motel's twisted order. I had one last rule to break, one final act of defiance. I recalled the dusty ledger, the entries recorded at 3:33 a.m., the witching hour when the motel's power peaked. I glanced at my watch. It was 3:28 a.m. I had 5 minutes. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to do something. Something big that would shatter the motel's hold on reality once and for all. With determination surging through me, I walked over to the window and stared out into the night, contemplating my next move. The sky began to lighten, the first hints of dawn appearing on the horizon, but the air remained thick with the motel's oppressive presence. Then, I saw it. The ancient oak tree dominating the landscape, the very tree where Reverend Croft had been lynched, somehow connected to the motel's curse. A desperate, insane idea formed in my mind. I glanced at my watch again. 3:31 a.m. I had 2 minutes. Ignoring the flickering lights, the screaming voices, and the weakening figure that still followed me, I bolted out of room 1 and into the cool night air. I sprinted toward the oak tree, adrenaline fueling my every step. As I reached the tree's base, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small metal box partially buried among the roots. It was old, rusted, and locked. I didn't have time to find a key. I had no time for anything. Grabbing a large rock from the ground, I began smashing the box, my hands bleeding and my muscles screaming in protest. The metal groaned and bent, but it wouldn't give. Just then, I heard a voice. Not the whispers, not the screams, but a single, clear voice that pierced through the chaos around me. It was Mr. Abernathy's voice. "Stop!" he shouted, running toward me from the motel. "You don't know what you're doing." I ignored him, my desperation fueled by adrenaline and a primal instinct to survive. I kept smashing the box until, finally, with a crack, the lock broke. I ripped open the lid, revealing a small leather-bound book nestled on a bed of faded velvet. It was the pocket Bible, the real one that had belonged to Reverend Croft, the one that held the power, the one I had thought was in the barn. I glanced at my watch. 3:33 a.m. Without hesitation, I grabbed the Bible. With a final surge of strength, Despite Abernathy's frantic shouts, I hurled the book into the smoldering remains of the motel I had set on fire. The air changed the moment the Bible hit the embers. A shockwave rippled through the atmosphere. It wasn't a physical explosion, but a distortion. The smoldering remains of the motel shimmered, wavered, and then vanished, leaving nothing behind but silence and the first light of dawn. Not collapsed, not burned to ash, but simply gone. One moment, there was a ruined building. The next, only an empty, pre-dawn, smoke-filled space remained. The oak tree stood, the clearing intact, but the Ozark Mountain Motel was gone, as if it had never existed. Mr. Abernathy skidded to a halt, staring at the empty space with an expression of stunned disbelief. He looked older, the weariness in his eyes deepened by a profound, almost ancient sadness. He didn't yell at me or threaten me. He simply looked and whispered, "You shouldn't have done that." "I had to," I replied, my voice hoarse and trembling. "It was the only way." He shook his head slowly. "It was a prison, but it was also a containment. You didn't destroy it. You released it." He gestured to the empty area, the weight of his words heavy in the air. "They were trapped, confined now." He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence, leaving a chilling silence between us. I didn't understand. I thought I had broken the cycle, destroyed the source of the evil, but his words and expression hinted at something far worse. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the pre-dawn mist, leaving me alone with the rising sun and the empty space where the motel had once stood. I never saw Mr. Abernathy again, nor did I return to that part of the Ozarks. I tried to put the whole experience behind me, convincing myself it was just a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. But I couldn't escape it. The rules followed me. Not the cleaning protocol, but the other rules, the ones whispered in the shadows, etched into the very fabric of the motel. I started seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye, shadows that moved when I wasn't looking. I began hearing whispers, faint, indistinct, but definitely there. Cold spots emerged, sudden drops in temperature with no logical explanation. And then I started seeing the number 6 everywhere. On clocks, license plates, receipts, and in my dreams. Room 6, the nexus, the gateway. It was then I realized Mr. Abernathy was right. I hadn't destroyed the motel. I had merely relocated it. It was no longer bound to that specific spot in the Ozarks. It was now everywhere and nowhere. I remained its night clerk. Soon, a new motel appeared, and I watched as a young man with hopeful eyes and a naive smile arrived, carrying a worn duffel bag. He looked like someone searching for a fresh start, just as I had. He checked in, received his keys, and was given a tour. Later, I saw him standing in the hallway, staring at the shadows in the shower of room 6, a confused frown on his face. I tried to warn him, to scream at him to leave, but my voice was just another whisper in the chorus. I was merely a shadow on the shower wall. The rules had changed, more subtle, more insidious. They change with each new location, each new iteration of the motel, but one rule always remains the same. Ignore the cleaning lady in room 6. She is not to be helped, and will always tell you to go in the opposite order of the rules. And so the cycle continues. The Ozark Mountain Motel, or whatever it calls itself now, continues to feed, and I am left to clean, a permanent member of its staff, forever trapped in its endless shifting hallways. I watch as new faces come and go, unaware of the darkness surrounding them. Each time, I hope that maybe this time will be different, that someone will break the cycle. But I know better. I am merely warning that no one can heed. A shadow that slips through the cracks of reality. Who would believe a shadow? Who would listen to a voice that barely whispers through the veil of fear? As I clean, I feel the weight of countless souls lost to the motel's grasp, knowing that my own fate is now intertwined with theirs, bound to this sinister place for eternity.